Hey guys. That light hopefully will go up soon. Okay, let's see if you guys liked it. Let's do chapter 2 of Walking Wolf first. Okay, sorry. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, Walking Wolf by Nancy A. Collins, chapter 2. After I first experienced shapeshifting, my life amongst the tribe became very different. The first and most radical change came with my apprenticeship to Medicine Dog. I'm going to put this slide. I know it's right. That's why it's outside. And let's move things so I don't accidentally. Okay. Okay, here we go. With my apprenticeship to Medicine Dog, the old shaman had always taken a grandfatherly interest in me, but now I was expecting to move my meager belongings from my father's teepee into his. Medicine Dog was a wise man, full of knowledge acquired during a long and eventful life. I remember I once asked him if he hated the Apache for blinding him in the right eye, and he laughed. My life was good in the old days, but it was the life of a fool. I was a mighty warrior back then. I was very proud. Too proud. My vanity made me weak. When the Apache took away my eye, I may have lost the ability to see things in this world, but I gained the ability to see things to see into the spirit world. Should I hate the Apache for giving me such a wonderful gift, Walking Wolf? Like I said, Medicine Dog was a wise man, but I, like other boys, was young and still itching to prove myself as a brave, so I tended to ignore a lot of what he told me. I genuinely liked the old fellow, but it chafed me that I had to tend his fire and fetch his water just like an old woman, while my old playmates, Quanah and Small Bear, were off hunting buffalo or out on pony raids. It pains me to look back and realize just how big a fool I was then. But Medicine Dog, he didn't seem to mind. I guess he expected a certain amount of thick-headedness on my part. Still, I did learn things despite myself. Medicine Dog schooled me in the prayers necessary to ensure successful raids and hunts, and the prayers that correctly guide the dead to the spirit world, and the prayers that confuse evil spirits so they can't tell which TP is the one they're looking for at night. He also taught me the breathing and meditation exercises that helped me control my shapeshifting, so I could summon what he called my true skin at will with a minimum of discomfort. He also warned me never to tell a white that I was a skinwalker. Whites are jealous of things they don't understand, of things they cannot have. That is why the human beings, we who lived on this land before they came, have had so much trouble with them. If you tell a white that you have more than one skin, they will try and take it away from you, just like they did to your natural father. Be very careful who you show your true skin to, Walking Wolf, if you want to keep it on your bones. Medicine Dog also told me stories of Coyote, the trickster god from whom all skinwalkers are descended. I reckoned it was on account of their most popular folk hero having the head of a coyote that the Plains Indians I knew back then rarely got upset by me sprouting hair, claws, and fangs. Instead of seeing a monster, they saw a god. After all, according to their folklore, Coyote was responsible in part for human beings coming into existence in the first place, and he gave them fire and corn and the buffalo to make their life easier. While the whites reaction to my condition was far more reasonable, it did nothing to prepare me for what I would run up against in their world, although I did get a taste of rejection early on. I've already mentioned Flood Moon. As I said earlier, I'd known her all my life. She was a pretty thing by Comanche standards, with long, straight black hair woven into two thick braids. She had this shy way of smiling that was enough to melt my heart every time she looked at me. I'd known from the time I was 7 years old that Flood Moon was going to be mine, and once, when we were still very young, I even got her to promise to be my wife when we grew up. But that was back when I was little wolf. Things became very different once I became Walking Wolf, and, like the young fool I was, I refused to admit it. As I said, most Comanche took my being not exactly human as a matter of course. Occasionally, I'd get asked by an exasperated older sister to threaten to eat a misbehaving child, but that was quite rare, and the children usually knew better. Flood Moon, however, was one of the few who had genuine trouble with my condition. Before I'd learned how to shift, she'd been all smiles and flirts. But when we rode back from the hunt that day, me still wearing my true skin, she grew ashen-faced and hurried into her family's teepee and wouldn't come out. Despite Flood Moon's sudden coolness towards me, I was still sweet on her. Whenever I could manage it, I would sneak away from Medicine Dog's teepee and loiter near the creek, waiting for her to pass on her way to gather firewood or water. One thing you've got to understand about the Comanche way of courting is that it was all very proper. Boys and girls after a certain age weren't allowed to be in one another's company unchaperoned, and there's nothing more bashful than a love-struck brave. So young lovers had to sneak what time they could together during the daylight. I spent agonizing hours waiting for just a glimpse of Flood Moon, and when I finally did get a few minutes alone with her, I was so tongue-tied I never said much. She would tolerate my presence well enough if I was wearing my human skin, but if I was wearing my true skin, she'd be as nervous as a pony staked out to trap a mountain cat, hurrying through her chores as fast as she could, often slopping half the water she'd drawn from the creek on her way back to camp. Although I was nowhere near as bold as some of my friends, who would lie outside their chosen one's teepee at night and whisper promises of love and marriage through the seams of the tent skins, I was determined to make Flood Moon mine and set about saving up ponies to give to her family as a marriage tribute. But first I had to make sure her father and her brothers would not turn down my offer. I talked one of the older, more respected women in the tribe into approaching Flood Moon's father, Calling Owl, and putting my case to him. Calling Owl was very pleased that his daughter had caught the fancy of a tribe's resident skinwalker, as it meant good luck for his family. But when Flood Moon heard that I'd sent the old woman over, she begged her father to ask for 30 horses. Although Calling Owl saw how having a skinwalker son-in-law as a good thing, he loved his daughter enough to agree to her wishes, at least for the moment. When the old woman told me how much Calling Owl wanted for Flood Moon, I was dismayed. 30 ponies? I was 13 years old and had only one pony to my name, and that was the one a Clouds had given me. How was I to get 30 ponies? Well, the same way any Comanches got ponies. It was up to me to steal some. Now, let me digress a bit and explain horse stealing, Comanche style. The Comanche set a great deal of stock in horse flesh, and if there is ever a people born to ride, it's the Comanche. Compared to, say, the Cheyenne, the Comanche were a short, squat race. On the ground, they were far from graceful, but on the back of a horse, they were poetry in motion. Since their society revolved around the horse, the Comanche used them as rate of exchange, and the mark of a rich man was to have more ponies than he could ever possibly ride. A truly powerful chief would have dozens, if not hundreds, of ponies, most of them taken in raids from either other tribes or settlers. And while whites considered horse stealing the lowest thing next to snatching an infant nursing in its mother's breast and dashing its brains out against the wall, if not lower, Indians saw it as a worthwhile skill. In fact, when they weren't out hunting buffalo, the Plains tribes seemed to spend the vast majority of their spare time stealing horses from one another. Still, it wasn't without its hazards. Although I was apprenticed to Medicine Dog, he did not forbid me from riding along with the others, riding with the other raids. After all, how else was I going to make myself a respected member of the band if I didn't distinguish myself on the warpath? Medicine Dog might have had one eye in the spirit world, but he was still a practical man. So I began joining the raiding parties, doing my best to help steal as many ponies as possible so I could benefit when the spoils were divided at the end of a successful raid. Still, it was slow going for a brave as young as myself, since the elder warriors got preferential treatment. A year passed, and 10 horses were all I had to show for it. I still ached for Flood Moon, and the waiting was driving me to distraction. Medicine Dog cautioned me and suggested I had much to learn about patience. Many Comanche braves waited until they were well into their 20s and were solidly established with many ponies and buffalo robes to their name before taking a wife. But my blood burned, and I was convinced that the only way I was ever going to know happiness was if I took Flood Moon into my teepee as my wife. One night, the Apaches raided our herd when most of the braves were out away hunting, and all of my ponies were stolen. At first, I was devastated. It had taken me so long to acquire those 10 ponies, only to have them stolen. Then my grief turned to anger, and I became determined to go after the Apaches and reclaim my horses, plus as many more as I possibly could. I set off after the Apache raiders on Medicine Dog's pony that very night, armed with nothing but a bow, some arrows, and a knife. They had stolen close to 100 horses. Their trail wasn't hard to find. Still, they had a head start, and I knew once they made it to the hill country, I wouldn't stand a chance. I caught up with the raiders near dawn, several miles west of the camp. They had decided that they had gotten away scot-free and had stopped for a brief meal along the banks of the dry riverbed. As I watched them from a distance, I could tell the 6 braves responsible for the raid were very young, some no older than myself, and overconfident. A couple of them had rifles, which added to their cockiness. It occurred to me that my decision to leave ahead of my fellow braves had been foolhardy. Here I was, alone, armed with nothing but a bow and a knife, while my enemies carried guns. There was no way I could reclaim the horses without exposing myself to attack, unless I took a lesson from the trickster himself. The Apache brave keeping watch was surprised to see me. Then again, he probably hadn't seen many upright wolves dressed in breechclouts and buckskin leggings before. "Greetings, brother human," I smiled, licking my snout and speaking a passable Apache. "I am Coyote." The Apache was so thunderstruck his knees began to wobble like a newborn colt's. He called out to his fellow braves who hurried to see what was the matter. Naturally, they were equally amazed to see the trickster god of legend standing before them. "I hope I am not bothering you fine warriors on this beautiful morning," I said, gesturing to the rising sun. But I was just passing by on my way to visit the Great Spirit, to ask him for certain favors for those who are my friends, and could not help but to notice what a beautiful herd of horses you have. Thank you, Father Coyote, stammered the raiding party's leader. You're going to see the Great Spirit? Yes, those who are blessed to Coyote receive good hunting and coup against their enemies. Did I mention before how fine your horses are? The Apache braves looked amongst themselves and glanced back at the herd. Yes, the Great Spirit shows great respect for those who prove their generosity to others, I continued, lying through my fangs. Why, just the other day, the Wasp Band of the Comanche gave me 10 horses. 10? Is that all? Snorted the Apache leader. I would not call that generous. Perhaps so, I said, but in any case, I must be on my way. Have a good journey, my young human friends. As I made to leave, the lead Apache called after me, Father Coyote, we cannot let you leave without giving you a gift. A gift, you say? Of what? Ponies. How many? I could tell he was trying to figure out how many ponies would be enough. He surely didn't want to offend a god important enough to put his case with the Great Spirit. 20? I had him dangling, but good. 20? What a coincidence. Why, the Kiwaka gave me a string of 20 ponies just last week. 40, the Apache blurted. I made a great show of scratching my chin in deliberation. I was actually enjoying the part of the sly trickster, but I knew I was running the risk of the irate braves unwilling. I was running the risk of irate braves unwilling to part with their share of the night's raid by calling my bluff. 40? Friend human being, you are truly generous and a great man. I shall be certain to mention your name first when I speak with the Great Spirit. You can imagine how surprised my tribe was when I rode back into camp, leading a string of 40 ponies. When I told old Medicine Dog how I succeeded in tricking the Apaches into returning my original 10 horses, plus 30 more, the old coot came close to busting a gut. Walking Wolf, you were indeed touched by the hand of Coyote. Only he could have wrested 40 ponies from an Apache brave without resorting to violence. Sorry, smoke break. I showed up the next afternoon in front of Calling Owl's teepee with the 30 horses needed to buy his daughter from him. Calling Owl was very pleased. Flood Moon, on the other hand, looked less than thrilled. She stood there, staring at her feet, as her father talked about how he was looking forward to grandbabies. After Calling Owl and I had sealed the transaction with a smoke from his pipe, Flood Moon went into her family's teepee for the last time and removed her sleeping robe, her feeding bowl, and a few other belongings. Walking behind me with her head still bowed, she followed me into my teepee. Suddenly I was married. Like I said, the Comanche were very practical people who didn't go in much for ceremony. How do you like your new home, Flood Moon? Isn't this better than the lean-to I built when we were children and playing camp together? Flood Moon grunted and started to unroll her sleeping blankets. She didn't seem too impressed by her new home, but I tried not to let her lack of enthusiasm bother me. I reached out to embrace her, only to have her go rigid in my arms. Flood Moon, what is the matter? I lifted her chin with my thumb and forefinger, but she looked away. I am frightened, Walking Wolf. I have never been with a man before. But I am your husband. You need not fear me. She looked at me from the corner of her eyes, smiling shyly. Go outside and smoke your pipe. When you finish, I will be waiting for you inside my sleeping robes, ready to be your wife. I was ready for her to be my wife right then, but I knew better than to hurry her. Comanche women could be shy, but once you got them under the sleeping robes, they were randier than a she-bear in heat. So I went outside, had me a smoke, and watched the sun go down. When I had finished my pipe, I got up and stood by the tent flap. I called softly to my wife. Flood Moon, are you ready? I'm coming in now. The moment I set foot in teepee, something crashed into the back of my head, knocking me to the ground where I stayed, unconscious until the next morning. When I came to, I discovered Flood Moon and her belongings were gone. The only thing she'd left behind was the grinding stone she used to cold-cock me. Judging from the amounts of blood on the grinding stone, it looked like she'd been meaning to crack my brain case open for the whole world to see what a witless fool I was. I staggered out of my teepee to find Medicine Dog waiting on me, puffing on his pipe. "So, you aren't dead," he said by way of greeting. "Where's Flood Moon? Where's my wife?" "She's gone." "Gone? Where'd she go?" Medicine Dog shrugged. "I don't know. She and Small Bear were very scared. They thought they'd killed you." "Small Bear? Flood Moon is with Small Bear?" I could feel the anger swell inside me. My head still ached, and I did not want to hear what Medicine Dog was telling me. They left together last night. My best friend, the woman I loved, both had betrayed me, and worse, they had robbed me of my pride. I had been made to look a fool in the eyes of the tribe. Such a crime against my honor could not go unpunished. My distress was quite obvious. Medicine Dog put aside his pipe and tried to calm me. "My son, do not let your anger drive you to do something worse than foolish." My head throbbed like a war drum, and I doubled over, pushing at the sides of my skull to keep them from exploding outward. My anger was fueling the pain inside my head, forcing my body into its true form. Medicine Dog stepped away from me. I had the bloodlust on me, and he knew words would be useless. Snarling like a beast, I fled the camp. I had the scent of Flood Moon and Small Bear, and I was determined to hunt them down and make them pay for their treachery. It did not take me long to catch up with them. Like most Vagar, I am a tireless runner. The rage burning deep inside of me kept me from growing weary. Although they had a whole night and a day's head start on horseback, I found them not long after dark. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. I saw their fire long before I saw them. They were alone except for each other and their horses, huddled against the coming night. Careful to keep upwind of their mouths, lest they catch my scent and alarm Small Bear, I circled their camp, listening to them as they talked. I could tell from their words and actions that they had been lovers for some time. Small Bear sat with his rifle at the ready, Flood Moon pressed close to him. The sight of my best friend sharing an intimacy with my wife that I myself had never known stoked my anger even higher, until everything I saw was covered by a blood-red scrim. One of the ponies whickered nervously. Small Bear tightened his grip on his gun, peering into the dark beyond the fire as he got to his feet. Flood Moon looked up at her lover, knuckling the sleep from her eyes. "Small Bear, what's wrong?" "There's something out there." I came in low, tackling him from behind, snarling like a rabid wolf. Small Bear's rifle discharged as he hit the ground. Flood Moon screamed out her lover's name, driving the knife she'd kept hidden in her blanket into my right side. I yowled in pain and grabbed at the intruding blade, giving Small Bear the chance to roll free and get back on his feet. Unsheathing his own knife, he made to drive it into my heart. Growling, I knocked the weapon from his hands and pounced on him as a coyote would a prairie dog, my teeth sinking deep into his soft, hairless throat. Now, I don't want people reading this to think the fight was one-sided. Small Bear was a strong, swift brave, and he did not surrender easily to death. Still, I tore at his struggling body with my talons, gleefully ripping his bowels free from his stomach. Small Bear's liver glistened brown-red in the in the campfire, lay on the prairie grass. Without pausing to think, I snapped up the tender morsel and devoured it on the spot. Wiping my muzzle on my forearm, I turned my yellow gaze to Flood Moon, who stood transfixed in horror at the ruined remains of her lover. Smiling, I plucked her knife from my side as if it were no more bothersome to me than a thorn. "Wife," I said, holding up the dripping blade, "is this how you greet your husband?" She gave a sob of fear and turned to flee, but I was too fast for her. I grabbed her by her braids, wrapping them around my forepaw, so her face would be within biting distance. Her eyes were huge with fear, and the smell of terror radiated like heat from the sun. Grinning, I licked her face with my tongue, laughing when she shuddered and began to cry. I took her there beside the cooling body of her lover. She screamed and whimpered and pleaded with me repeatedly as I raped her. For that is what I did. I don't deny it. But all it did was increase my determination to punish her even further. By the time my lust had run its course, Flood Moon bled from dozens of deep bites and scratches on her breasts, belly, buttocks, and thighs. Sated at last, I pulled myself from her quivering, sobbing body and collapsed beside her in a deep slumber. I awoke to find Flood Moon astride me, ready to plunge her knife into my chest. I'll never forget looking up into the face of the woman who, until that day, I had loved with all my life and heart, her face rendered almost unrecognizable by the bruises I'd given her. The hatred that burned in her eyes was all-consuming. She screamed in triumph as the knife sank up to the hilt in my chest. My first reaction was a primal one. Without thinking, I swiped at her as she struggled to pull the blade free for a second strike, my talons sinking into the soft flesh of her jugular. Flood Moon clutched her throat, a rattling gasp coming from her lips. I had sliced open her windpipe. Struggling to get to my feet, I tugged at the knife wedged in my ribs. I was fully expecting to die, but to my surprise, after an initial spurt of blood, my wound sealed itself. The same could not be said for Flood Moon, who lay writhing on the ground at my feet, blood spurting between her fingers. I felt as if I'd woken from a bad dream, only to find myself trapped within a nightmare. My head no longer ached. I was empty of the anger that had driven me so relentlessly to such a horrible end. I looked around me as if in a daze. When I saw the mutilated body of Small Bear, I cried out in horror. Even as I closed my eyes to the murder I had committed, my memory replayed for me how I brutally violated the only woman I had ever loved. When I opened them again, it was to see that Flood Moon, in her last moments, had crawled next to Small Bear to die. I buried them there side by side on the lone prairie. I wept as I dug their common grave, with the knife Flood Moon had planted in my heart, mourning as much for myself as for my victims, for I knew I could not return to my tribe after what I had done. I grew physically ill at the thought of how 8 Cloud Rising, Medicine Dog, Quana, Pita Nunkuna, and the others would react once they learned my crimes. Flood Moon and Small Bear had wounded my pride, but the punishment I had meted out to them was beyond all decent measure. And to make matters worse, I had compounded my sin by breaking the Comanche taboo against cannibalism. I was ashamed and frightened by what I had done. I had lost control of my baser nature and allowed it to revel in the pain of others. I felt sick to my soul. I decided I needed to know more about my strange powers and the beast inside me, lest I lose control again and harm someone else dear to me. There was only one way I can learn more about myself. I decided it was finally time for me to go into the white man's world. And that is chapter 2. Hopefully it doesn't drop before chapter 1. Okay, I hope you're enjoying it. I'll do one of these a day, and hopefully they'll, drop an order, and hopefully you like it. And yeah, there's not for kids. Definitely not. Definitely not for kids. So, okay, you guys have a great night. Love ya.